Ava has always been a generous woman, dedicated to helping others, even when life has not been kind to her. But everything changes when she saves a white child from drowning and, instead of receiving thanks, she is met with cold stares and suspicious whispers. The quiet life Ava knew is turned upside down, forcing her to face unexpected challenges. What happened in this moment that changed everything? And how did her courage transform her life in surprising ways? Before we delve deeper into the story, tell us where you are watching from and if you enjoy stories of courage and overcoming. Don't forget to subscribe. It was a typical summer day, the sun shining brightly over the park. Families were enjoying the day, gathered at the community pool. Among them was Ava Thompson, a 32-year-old black woman with a warm smile and kind eyes. She watched her 8-year-old niece, Zoe, splashing in the shallow water with other children. Ava, her feet submerged in the cool water, felt a peaceful peace as Zoe prepared to show off her newest swimming trick. "I'm watching, honey. Show me." Ava cheered proudly as Zoe somersaulted underwater. The girl's infectious laughter echoed through the pool, catching the attention of the parents around her. However, some glances seemed to carry a different weight, something Ava was painfully familiar with. She noticed the lingering glances and whispers around her, but as usual, she pretended not to notice. These subtle gestures were constant reminders that she didn't quite belong in this space. Despite this, she maintained her posture, a habit she had acquired over the years, trying not to appear as a threat in places where she felt she didn't fit in. Her train of thought was interrupted when a voice called out to her, and Ava looked up to see Sarah, a longtime acquaintance. The unexpected encounter would trigger changes Ava could never have imagined. As Ava Thompson, a dedicated teacher, lounged by the community pool on a typical summer day, Sarah Miller, the mother of one of Ava's students, approached her with a polite but slightly uncomfortable smile. "Tommy is loving his class," Sarah commented, trying to start a conversation. Ava, always eager to connect, praised the boy's talent for creative writing, but she couldn't help but notice the subtle distance that existed between them, an invisible barrier of class and color. Just as the awkward silence threatened to set in, the cheerful voice of Zoe, Ava's niece, interrupted, ordering ice cream. Ava, grateful for the opportunity to escape, led the girl to the concession stand, as the whispers and curious glances of the other parents followed her. Even with years of experience, Ava still felt the weight of being one of the few black people in a predominantly white neighborhood. She held her head high, knowing that she had as much right to be there as any other family. Returning with Zoe, who had chosen rainbow ice cream, Ava allowed herself a moment of reflection as she observed the families around her. Laughter, joy, and connection surrounded the place, everything she longed for but sometimes felt out of reach. Still, Ava never gave up hope. She knew that one day she would find her place, being recognized for who she truly was, not just the color of her skin. Suddenly, a splashing sound louder than the others made Ava look up from her book. In the middle of the pool, a little blonde girl struggled to stay afloat. Ava's heart raced. Without thinking, she dropped the book and ran toward the water, diving hard to reach the child. Her teacher instincts and lifeguard training, learned years ago, took over. Ava managed to grab the little girl and bring her back to the surface, holding her tightly. While others in the pool finally noticed what was happening and screamed for help, Ava kept the child safe, her heart pounding but her mind focused on one goal, making sure that little girl was out of danger. Hands outstretched, Ava and the girl were finally pulled to dry land, surrounded by a growing crowd of onlookers. Ava's focus was entirely on the motionless child in front of her. The girl was not breathing. Without hesitation, Ava drew on her CPR training, tilting the child's head, pinching her nose, and giving 2 rescue breaths. Then she began chest compressions, quietly mumbling the count as she worked tirelessly. Silence fell over the surrounding crowd, broken only by the rhythmic sound of the compressions and the soft rustle of water in the distance. "Please, honey, breathe," Ava whispered, each second feeling like an eternity. Despite the sound of someone calling for an ambulance in the background, everything around her seemed distant. Ava's world was all about this moment, this child, the fight for her life. And then, just as despair began to set in, the girl coughed, expelling water from her lungs and opening her eyes, confused and scared. A collective sigh of relief went through the crowd as Ava gently laid the child on her side and rubbed her back. "It's okay, honey, just breathe," she soothed. As the adrenaline began to wear off, Ava took in the scene around her, shocked and awed faces watching her intently. She felt exposed, her clothes plastered to her body and her hair a tangled mess. Suddenly, a woman, clearly panicked, burst through the crowd. "Emily, oh my God, Emily!" She fell to her knees beside her daughter, her hands shaking and her eyes wide with relief and fear. "She's okay now," Ava said calmly, helping the mother hold the little girl. "She needs to be checked by the paramedics, but she's breathing normally." The woman nodded, holding her daughter tightly and exchanging a look with Ava, a mixture of gratitude and something else. Before Ava could say anything, a man, Emily's father, approached, his face full of concern. "What happened? Is she okay?" His wife explained, still shaking, that her daughter had nearly drowned and that Ava had saved her. The father gave Ava a surprised look, a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. "You saved our daughter?" he asked, still stunned. Ava nodded, feeling a little uncomfortable at the intensity of his gaze. "I saw her struggling at the bottom of the pool. I used to be a lifeguard, so I just reacted." The man, with an arm around his wife, thanked her again, but there was an underlying tension that Ava recognized, that uncomfortable uncertainty some people feel when their expectations are challenged. The arrival of the paramedics interrupted the moment, and Emily was soon being attended to. Meanwhile, Ava noticed the murmurs in the crowd. Snatches of conversation reached her ears. "Who is she? I've never seen her here before. How come no one noticed the drowning girl? I'm glad she was here." These words, spoken with some reluctance, made Ava's heart sink. Even after saving a life, some people seemed more concerned with her appearance than with her heroic act. Zoe appeared at Ava's side, hugging her waist. "Auntie Ava, you were amazing, you saved that little girl." Ava smiled softly, caressing her niece. "I just did what anyone would do, honey." But as she looked at the faces around her, some filled with admiration, others with suspicion, Ava knew that what she had done was more than that. She had accomplished something extraordinary that would somehow echo in this community for a long time to come. Emily's parents were getting ready to go to the hospital, and before leaving, the girl's mother turned to Ava one more time. "Thank you again, really, we don't know what we would have done if you weren't here." Ava smiled gently, replying, "I'm glad I could help. I hope Emily recovers soon." However, Ava noticed that despite their thanks, none of her parents had asked her name, nor offered theirs. A small detail, but one that spoke volumes. As the crowd began to disperse, returning to their routines, Ava could still feel the stares and whispers around her. "Auntie Ava, can we go home now?" Zoe asked, holding her hand. Ava nodded, suddenly eager to leave this place. Feeling drained, Ava replied, "Yes, honey, let's go home." As they gathered their belongings, Ava couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. She had saved a life, proven herself, but as she and Zoe stepped out of the pool, something told her that the biggest challenge was yet to come. The morning after the incident, the sun was shining, but Ava woke up with a queasy feeling in her stomach. Even as she went about her morning routine, the feeling lingered. As she went out to get the newspaper, she noticed her neighbor Mr. Peterson, who normally waved cheerfully, quickly looking away, concentrating on the hose he was adjusting. Frustrated, Ava gathered up the paper and went back inside. Flipping through the pages, she found a short article about the incident at the pool. Her heart sank when she saw that the article downplayed the incident, focusing more on pool safety than on Ava's heroic actions. She was not mentioned by name, only described as a 32-year-old local schoolteacher. As she got ready for work, Ava's phone began buzzing with notifications of social media mentions of the incident. With a mix of curiosity and trepidation, she began to read the comments. Some were encouraging, "I'm proud of our community for coming together during this time." Others said that, "Accidents happen, thank goodness everyone is safe." But one comment made her freeze, "I heard the girl was just playing around, some people do anything to get noticed." Ava's blood boiled. How could anyone doubt what had happened? She could clearly remember Emily's body in her arms, with no signs of life. Shaking off her discomfort, Ava finished getting ready. She had a meeting at school to discuss plans for the upcoming school year. As she headed to school, she tried to focus on the positive. She had saved a life, and that should outweigh any negative reactions, right? But as she entered the building, she felt the eeriness. Conversations would stop as she walked by, only to resume in whispers. Susan, her usually warm coworker, only gave her a forced smile before quickly walking away. With a heavy heart, Ava made her way to the principal's office. As she waited, she heard a muffled discussion inside. What if the parents decide to sue? We need to prepare for any consequences. Ava's heart raced. They were talking about her. Before she could absorb what she had heard, Principal Matthews appeared, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Come in, Ava." The meeting felt surreal. As they discussed plans for the coming year, the tension was palpable. The principal kept bringing up the pool incident, asking detailed questions about what had happened. "Are you sure the child was in danger?" she asked at one point. Sometimes kids can be dramatic. Ava felt as if she had been slapped in the face. Emily was unconscious. "If I hadn't acted, she could have died," she replied firmly. Matthews nodded, but there was skepticism in her eyes. As she left the office, Ava felt a deep sense of isolation. Instead of recognition for her bravery, she was being treated with suspicion. The day only got worse. During lunch, Ava heard snippets of conversation that made her feel sick. What was she doing at the pool? Some people just seemed to want attention. She wanted to scream that she had every right to be there, that she had saved a child, but the words wouldn't come. Later, as she was packing up to leave, her coworker Mark appeared in the doorway. "I heard about what happened at the pool," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "Must have been quite a scene, huh?" Ava nodded cautiously. "It was intense," she admitted. "I'm glad Emily's okay." Mark nodded, but there was something odd in his eyes. "I ran into Emily's parents at the grocery store yesterday. They seemed uncomfortable about the situation." Ava's heart sank. "Uncomfortable? What do you mean?" Mark shrugged. "They seemed to think that maybe things had been exaggerated, you know." Feeling exhausted, Ava said, "Yes, honey, let's go home," as they gathered their things. Despite having saved a life, proven herself, and acted without hesitation, Ava couldn't shake the feeling that this episode was far from over. The next morning, even though the sun was shining, she woke up with a nagging sense of unease. As she went about her morning routine, the feeling only grew. As she went outside to get the newspaper, she noticed her neighbor, Mr. Peterson, watering the lawn. Usually he would wave and wish her a good day, but this time he looked away, concentrating on adjusting the hose. Frustrated, Ava picked up the paper and went back inside. Flipping through the pages, she found a short article about the pool incident. Her heart sank when she realized that the article downplayed the incident, emphasizing more the issue of pool safety and parental supervision, while reducing her heroic role to a 32-year-old teacher at the local school. At the same time, her phone began to buzz with social media notifications. Ava, driven by curiosity and a bit of apprehension, began to read the comments. There were messages of support, but also harsh comments like, "That seems like an exaggeration, the girl was just playing." Those kinds of comments made her stomach turn. Ava's mind flashed back to the moment she had held Emily's lifeless body, bringing her back to life with CPR. Those terrible moments were seared into her memory. Still, she got ready for work, trying to focus on the positive. She had saved a life, and that should outweigh any criticism. But when she arrived at school, the tense atmosphere was undeniable. Muffled conversations stopped as she passed, and forced smiles replaced warm greetings like Susan's usually enthusiastic greeting. When she reached the principal's office, she heard a tense conversation. "What if the parents decide to sue?" a voice asked. "Sue for saving their daughter's life?" Ava's heart raced when she realized they were talking about her. When she finally walked in for her meeting, Principal Matthews was friendly, but the tone of the conversation carried an underlying tension. The incident in the pool kept coming up, as if he were trying to confirm whether the situation had really been as serious as she had claimed. "Are you sure the child was in danger?" he asked, which made her indignant. "She was unconscious when I pulled her out of the water," she replied firmly. After the meeting, Ava felt isolated. Throughout the day, she heard comments that only increased her frustration, such as when two teachers, in a whispered conversation, asked why she was in the pool. Ava felt judged and helpless, but she carried on, pretending not to hear anything. During lunch in the teacher's lounge, she found herself unable to concentrate on anything. The feeling of being watched and judged would not leave her alone. It was then that Mrs. Rodriguez, an older colleague, approached her with a look of concern. "I've heard some rumors, my dear, and I just want you to know that not everyone thinks that way. You did something brave, and that shouldn't be forgotten." The teacher's gesture of support brought a small relief to Ava, who thanked him, feeling a glimmer of hope that not everyone viewed her with suspicion. However, that hope was shattered later in the day, when Principal Matthews called her back for a talk. When he entered the office, the mood was serious. "I've had calls from concerned parents," he began, mentioning that Emily's family was considering legal action, accusing her of exaggerating the situation to get attention. "I saved her life," Ava protested, her voice thick with frustration. The principal sighed, explaining that the issue now was the school's reputation and the controversy that the incident had generated. His words hit Ava hard, sending a chill down her spine. Ava heard the words and felt a tightness in her chest. "What are you suggesting?" she asked, trying to remain calm. "I think it would be good for you to take a few days off," he suggested cautiously, "paid leave, of course." It sounded like a blow. Days off? It sounded like she was being punished for saving a child's life. "That doesn't make sense," Ava replied, her voice shaking. "I didn't do anything wrong. I used my training to save Emily. How does that justify taking me away?" Principal Matthews held up his hands in a placating gesture. "It's not a suspension, Ava. Just some time to let things cool down, for everyone's sake." As she walked out of the office, Ava's head was spinning. How had everything gone so wrong? She had acted on instinct, doing exactly what she was trained to do, and now, instead of being acknowledged for her actions, she was being treated like someone who had done something wrong. As she drove home, her emotions were mixed, anger at the injustice, sadness at how everyone seemed to have turned against her, and a deep fear of what this would mean for her future in Oak. When she pulled into her driveway, Ava noticed a group of neighbors gathered across the street. They fell silent as she got out of the car, their eyes following her all the way to her front door. The weight of their unspoken judgment was almost unbearable. Inside, she sank onto the couch, exhausted. She thought about everything she had built in this town, her job, her home, the community she had tried so hard to be a part of. And now, it felt like it was all falling apart. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister. "I heard what happened. This is absurd. You are a hero, no matter what these people say." Ava felt a lump in her throat. At least her family still believed in her, but that didn't make the feeling of isolation go away. As the night wore on, Ava couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every car that passed, every sound from outside made her tense. She felt like a stranger in her own home, in a neighborhood where she had lived for so long. Unable to bear the silence, she decided to go for a walk, hoping to clear her head. But as soon as she stepped outside, she regretted it. Neighbors who used to be friendly now looked away or walked away. The few who did look at her did so with suspicion. As she turned a corner, Ava came across Sarah and Tim, who were with Emily. For a moment, everything seemed to stop. Emily recognized her and seemed about to speak, but Sarah pulled her close, giving Ava a warning look. "Don't talk to strangers, honey," Tim said, loud enough for Ava to hear. Her heart sank. She wasn't a stranger, she was the person who had saved her daughter's life. But in their eyes, she had become someone to be feared. Back home, Ava finally broke down in tears. She wept at the injustice of it all, at the distortion of what she had done, at the prejudice she now faced in her own community. The next few days dragged by, all blending together in a haze of loneliness and uncertainty. She avoided her usual routines, unable to deal with the stares and whispers that seemed to follow her everywhere she went. Then, one afternoon, something unexpected happened. As she sat on her porch, lost in thought, she saw a small figure approaching. It was Emily, walking alone, holding something in her hands. Ava's heart raced. She looked around, expecting to see Sarah or Tim nearby, but Emily was alone. The little girl stood before her, nervous. "Mrs. Thompson," she said softly, "I made this for you." She held out a crumpled envelope and a small, wrapped package. "Mommy and Daddy said I shouldn't, but I just wanted to thank you for saving me." Emily's words brought tears to Ava's eyes. She took the gifts carefully. "Thank you, Emily," she whispered, deeply moved. "That gesture means a lot to me." Emily's face lit up with a shy smile. "Can I give you a hug?" Without hesitation, Ava opened her arms, and Emily ran into them. As she held the little girl, Ava felt a weight lift from her heart. That simple gesture of gratitude, unencumbered by adult prejudices, brought immense relief to her wounded soul. "You're my hero, Miss Thompson," Emily whispered before walking away. "I don't care what other people say." As Emily walked away, casting quick glances and waving every now and then, Ava clutched the letter and gift to her chest, waiting until the girl was out of sight. With trembling hands, she finally opened the envelope. Inside was a crayon drawing, two stick figures, one tall with curly hair and the other shorter with braids, holding hands and surrounded by hearts. Below, in clumsy letters, it read, "Thank you for saving me. You are my hero. Love, Emily." Ava could barely hold back the tears as she read the message. Then she opened the small package, revealing a plastic medal, the kind given out at school events, with the word "hero" written in glitter. Emily's simple act of gratitude was like a lifeline to someone who was drowning. It reminded Ava that no matter how people reacted or the doubts that loomed, what she had done was real and meaningful. She had saved a life, and in the eyes of the one who mattered most, the child she had rescued, she was, indeed, a hero. With the drawing and the medal in hand, Ava walked into the house with a lighter step than she had in days. She placed Emily's gift on the mantelpiece, a visible reminder of the truth amidst the lies and judgments that surrounded her. As she watched the girl's heartfelt offerings, Ava's phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. She hesitated, fearing further accusations or threats, but something compelled her to answer. "Hello. Is this Ava Thompson?" a male voice asked on the other end. "Yes, it's me," Ava replied cautiously. "Ms. Thompson, my name is Marcus Johnson, and I'm a reporter for the National Tribune. I've heard some stories about an incident at the local pool, and I'd like to talk to you about it." Ava's heart raced. A reporter for a national newspaper. How had her story gotten this far? "I don't know what to tell you," she stammered, "it's been a tough time." Marcus's voice softened. "I can imagine, which is why I'm calling. I've heard conflicting reports about what happened, and I want to tell your side of the story. It seems like there's more to this than just a simple rescue." Ava hesitated, remembering how her words had been twisted before. Could she trust this stranger to tell her story fairly? Sensing her reluctance, Marcus continued, "Ms. Thompson, to be honest, what I'm hearing is about a woman who saved a child's life and then faced backlash from her community. That doesn't feel right, and I think it's a story that needs to be told. I'd like to offer you the chance to tell your side." Ava's eyes drifted back to Emily's drawing on the mantelpiece. She thought about how brave the girl had been in thanking him, even in the face of her parents' disapproval. Maybe it was Ava's turn to be brave, too. "Okay," she said finally, "I'll talk to you. But I want to tell you the whole truth, not just what makes a good headline." "That's exactly what I want," Marcus assured her. "How about we meet tomorrow? I can come over so you can feel more comfortable." They set up a time, and as they hung up, Ava felt a mix of nervousness and hope that this would be her chance to set the record straight. The next day, Ava sat with Marcus in his living room. He was younger than she had expected, with kind eyes and a warm smile that helped put her at ease. "Thank you for having me, Ms. Thompson," Marcus began as he adjusted his tape recorder. "Why don't we start from the beginning? Can you tell me about the day of the incident at the pool?" Taking a deep breath, Ava began to recall the events of that fateful day. To her surprise, the words flowed more easily than she had expected. She described the peaceful afternoon at the pool, the moment she realized Emily was in danger, the adrenaline-fueled rescue, and the critical moments that brought the girl back to life. Marcus listened intently, occasionally asking for clarification, but mostly letting Ava tell her story on her own terms. When she got to the part about the community's reaction, Marcus's expression grew more serious. "So instead of being celebrated for your heroic actions, you faced distrust and hostility?" he asked, writing it down on his pad. Ava nodded, feeling a lump forming in her throat. "It's like they can't. Not accepting that I, a black woman, could be a hero," she murmured. Ava felt a tightness in her chest as she recounted how some in the community had even suggested that she had exaggerated the severity of the situation. Marcus, with a look of disbelief, asked about Emily's parents. Ava's voice broke as she spoke about Sarah and Tim, who had treated her as if she had done something wrong by saving their daughter. It was hard to hide the pain she felt as she recalled those encounters. As the interview progressed, Ava opened up more and more, not only about the incident in the pool, but also about the difficulties of being one of the few black teachers in a predominantly white school, the subtle and sometimes blatant prejudices she faced, and her deep love for her students. "Ms. Thompson, I want to thank you for your honesty and courage in sharing your story," Marcus said at the end. "I think it's an important story and it needs to be told." Ava managed a small smile. "Thank you for listening. I hope this makes a difference in some way." Before leaving, Marcus looked at Ava with admiration. "I know many people who call themselves heroes, but you, Ms. Thompson, are the real hero. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." After Marcus left, Ava felt a mix of relief and nervousness. She had come out into the open, had revealed her experiences and emotions, and now all that was left was to wait for what would come next. A week later, the article was published and had an immediate impact. Marcus did an excellent job of telling Ava's story, connecting what happened at the pool to the broader context of racial prejudice and highlighting the often overlooked contributions of black women. The headline read, "Hero or Pariah? The story of a black teacher who saved a child and paid the price." As Ava read the article, she was overcome with a flood of emotions. Marcus captured her voice perfectly, portraying her experiences with sensitivity. It also included input from child safety experts who praised her swift and effective actions, as well as social commentators who addressed the broader implications of the community backlash. What Ava didn't expect was how quickly her story would spread. Within hours, the news was trending in major media outlets across the country, and her phone was buzzing with notifications. On social media, the hashtag Justice for Ava quickly gained traction, with thousands of people expressing outrage at the treatment she had received and praising her courage. Ava watched in amazement as the conversation about racism and bias took center stage in the news and on social media. Black women across the country began sharing their own stories of facing bias in their communities, showing that Ava's experience was not an isolated incident. Celebrities and influencers also joined the movement, reaffirming how unfair the backlash she had faced was. As support grew, Ava received countless messages of solidarity, many from other Black educators, thanking her for her courage in sharing her story. One in particular caught her attention, from a group of teachers in a neighboring state, who wrote, "Your courage in saving that child and sharing your story inspires us to keep going. You are not alone." Tears flowed as Ava read each message, feeling seen and understood for the first time since the incident. And it wasn't just strangers who reached out, some of her colleagues, who had previously shunned her, began to apologize. Susan, a teacher who had distanced herself, left an emotional message acknowledging her mistake and praising Ava's bravery. Even her neighbors began to change their tune. Mrs. Peterson, who lived across the street, brought Ava a meal, apologizing for her husband's behavior. "We were wrong, Ava. So terribly wrong. Can you forgive us?" Ava accepted the apologies gratefully, recognizing the courage it took to admit one's mistakes. While they were small gestures, they represented the first steps toward healing a divided community. As the backlash continued, Ava began to believe that her story could indeed make a difference. Ava received a call from a civil rights organization, which offered to provide legal support if she decided to challenge her suspension. The school saw Ava's situation as an opportunity to address systemic bias in education and community responses to the heroism of Black people. This brought in unexpected allies, such as a group of lifeguards who started an online campaign calling for recognition for Ava's life-saving act. The petition quickly garnered thousands of signatures, with many commenters praising her swift and courageous actions. One lifeguard with 15 years of experience noted that Ava's actions followed protocol exactly, saying that she assessed the situation, acted quickly, and performed CPR, saving the child's life, noting that her skin color was irrelevant to her heroism. As national attention grew, Ava began to notice changes in the way those around her treated her. The icy interactions and whispered conversations were replaced by shy smiles and words of support. The backlash caused many in the community to rethink their own prejudices. One day, as Ava was tending to her garden, something she had avoided since the incident, she heard a group of children approaching, accompanied by their parents. Her heart skipped a beat, not knowing what to expect, but when she saw the smiles and signs with messages of support, such as, "Miss Thompson is our hero," she was overcome with emotion. One of the parents, Mr. Rodriguez, was the first to speak, apologizing for the way the community had acted and acknowledging that his children had always known Ava to be an incredible teacher. Ava was overcome with emotion as each child came up to give her a hug or a gift. These were the students she had always cared about so much, who saw her beyond the color of her skin. As more neighbors joined the small gathering, offering apologies and words of support, Ava realized that while there were still some who held prejudices, this was a beginning, a sign that hearts and minds were changing. The impact of the backlash also forced the school board to reconsider its position. Days after the article went viral, Ava received a call from Principal Matthews requesting a meeting. When she arrived at school, she was met by the principal and several members of the school board. The atmosphere was tense, but Dr. Harris, the head of the board, took the floor to apologize on everyone's behalf. He acknowledged that Ava's actions in the pool were heroic and that the school's response was influenced by unconscious bias. The board offered to reinstate Ava immediately, with retroactive pay for the time she was taken off, and invited her to participate in developing diversity and bias training for the entire staff. Ava, while relieved, still felt hurt by the speed with which she had been dismissed. She accepted the apology and reinstatement, but made it clear that rebuilding trust would take time. "I love teaching and I love my students," Ava said firmly. "But what happened to me is not an isolated incident. It reflects deeper issues that need to be addressed." Board members agreed, recognizing the gravity of the issue. As Ava's story continued to resonate, education experts began to highlight the importance of diversity among teachers and the need to better support Black educators. Ava's story was held up as an example of both the challenges they face and the positive influence these professionals can have on their communities and the lives of their students. Ava received another visitor amid the public attention her story was receiving. Sarah and Tim, Emily's parents, showed up at her door one night, visibly uncomfortable but determined. "Miss Thompson," Tim began, his voice thick with emotion, "we owe you a huge apology." Sarah, tears in her eyes, agreed. "We were so scared by what happened, and we let our prejudices and the town gossip cloud our judgment. We forgot the most important thing: you saved our daughter's life." Ava stood in the doorway, feeling a mix of intense emotions. Part of her wanted to close the door and shut out the people who had hurt her, but another part, the one that had always believed in the power of understanding and forgiveness, stood firm. "Please," Tim said, his voice shaking, "can we come in and talk?" After a brief hesitation, Ava stepped aside and let them in. They sat in the living room, where an uncomfortable silence hung in the air. Sarah's eyes fell on a drawing of Emily on the mantelpiece. "She made this for you, didn't she?" Sarah asked softly. Ava nodded, saying that Emily's visit to say thank you had meant a lot to her. Tim hung his head in shame. "We told her not to come. We were so caught up in our own fear and prejudice that we couldn't see what was right in front of us. Our daughter knew the truth, but we didn't want to hear it." Throughout the conversation, Sarah and Tim shared their reflections on their initial shock and how they were led by distrust. They confessed their unconscious biases, admitting that they only began to realize it after the repercussions of the incident. "We've done a lot of soul-searching over the past few weeks," Sarah said, wiping away tears. "The public backlash has forced us to confront some difficult truths about ourselves. We are ashamed of how we reacted. Ms. Thompson, you saved our daughter's life, and we responded with ingratitude." Ava listened with a heavy heart, her eyes also filling with tears. "Do you have any idea how much it hurt to be treated like a criminal for saving a life?" she asked quietly. Tim nodded, unable to meet her gaze. "We can't imagine the pain we caused you. We don't expect forgiveness, but we needed you to know how sorry we are and how grateful we are for what you did for Emily." As the conversation continued, Ava felt a weight lift. The pain was still there, but hearing Sarah and Tim's sincere remorse began to heal wounds she had thought would never heal. "I'm not going to pretend that everything is okay now," Ava said. "What happened will take time to process. But I appreciate you coming forward and admitting your mistakes. It's a start." Before they left, Sarah hesitated and handed over an envelope. "We've decided to drop any legal action. In fact, we've written a public statement thanking you for saving Emily. We'll send it to the paper tomorrow." Ava took the envelope, her hands shaking slightly. "Thank you," she said softly. "That means a lot." When Sarah and Tim left, Ava felt like a chapter was closing. The path ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in weeks, she saw hope for real change. In the weeks that followed, Sarah and Tim's public statement, combined with Ava's reinstatement at school, generated another wave of media attention. However, this time, the focus was on reconciliation and community work to address prejudice and seek change. Ava became the center of this new narrative, a reluctant symbol of resilience and forgiveness. She was invited to speak at community events, sharing her experiences and reflections on how to combat racism. Ava was initially hesitant, still emotionally shaken, but as she saw the impact of her words, she embraced this new role. At a town hall meeting before a packed auditorium, Ava said, her voice firm, "What happened to me is not unique. Every day, people of color face prejudice and discrimination, often in subtle ways that are easy to ignore. My experience shows how quickly these prejudices come to the surface in moments of fear." As she spoke, she watched the audience's reactions, some nodded, others wiped away tears. She saw the understanding on their faces that had been missing before. "Change is not easy," she concluded, but it requires us to face our flaws and do better. Hard truths about ourselves and our society have emerged, but I've seen firsthand the power of this transformation. I've seen people own up to their mistakes and commit to doing better, which fills me with hope. I invite everyone to join me on this journey of understanding and growth. The applause that followed was deafening. As Ava stepped off the stage, she was surrounded by hugs and handshakes from people who had never spoken to her before, expressing their gratitude for sharing her story and asking how they could help make a difference. In the weeks that followed, Ava saw real change begin to take shape at Oak. The school board, true to its promise, implemented comprehensive diversity and bias training for all staff. Ava was instrumental in creating the curriculum, using her own experiences to shape meaningful and impactful sessions. The effects of these changes rippled beyond the school. Community groups began organizing workshops on racial equity and inclusion. The local library started a book club focused on Black authors, and the city council announced a review of local policies to ensure they were fair and inclusive. The changes were reflected in the classrooms, too. Ava noticed that students were more open to discussions about race and diversity. Inspired by her, the students created a kindness club to promote acceptance and understanding at school. One day, as Ava was leaving school, she ran into Emily waiting for her by her car. The girl ran up to her, hugging her waist excitedly. "Miss Thompson, I finished my history project," Emily exclaimed, beaming with pride. Ava smiled and hugged her back. "I knew you could do it, Emily," she replied. As the girl excitedly talked about her project, Sarah approached with a shy smile. "I hope you don't mind," Sarah said. "Emily wanted to wait to tell you the news in person." Ava smiled, "Not at all, it's always a pleasure to celebrate my students' achievements." There was a slight unease in the air, but the genuine warmth in Sarah's eyes softened the tension. "We're having a dinner to celebrate Emily tonight," Sarah said. "We'd be honored if you could come." Surprised by the invitation, Ava hesitated for a moment, memories of past hurts flashing through her mind. But as she looked into Emily's hopeful face, she felt her reservations melt away. "I'd love to," she replied softly. That evening, sitting at the dinner table with Emily and her family, Ava felt a peace she hadn't felt in months. Conversation flowed naturally, filled with laughter and stories. There were still moments of tension, words left unsaid, but it was a start, a step toward healing and understanding. Over time, Ava watched her community continue to evolve. The changes didn't come without challenges. There were setbacks, moments of frustration as old habits resurfaced, but whenever Ava saw people making conscious efforts to learn and grow, she felt empowered. Her own life changed, too. The national attention her story received opened doors she never imagined. She was invited to speak at education conferences, sharing her experiences with teachers across the country, and she even began writing a book chronicling her journey and offering guidance for creating more inclusive educational environments. But perhaps the most important change came one spring afternoon, almost a year after the incident. Ava was in her classroom, preparing for the next day's activities, when she heard a knock on the door. "Come in," she said. To her surprise, it was Principal Matthews, accompanied by Dr. Harris from the school board and Mayor Thompson. "Ava," the principal began, with an unusually lively voice, "we have some news to share." Dr. Harris smiled and said, "Miss Thompson, in recognition of your exceptional contributions to our school and community, we would like to offer you a new position." The position of Diversity and Inclusion Coordinator for the entire school district was being created, and they believed Ava was the ideal person for the job. Stunned, Ava listened as they explained that the position entailed working with all schools in the district, implementing diversity initiatives and training staff to ensure fair practices at all levels. "You have done so much for our community," Mayor Thompson added, "we believe you can help us create lasting systemic change." Ava, overcome with emotion, began to realize the depth of what she had accomplished. Ava was overcome with a flood of emotions when she received the offer: pride, excitement, a hint of trepidation, and overwhelming gratitude. This was a chance to make a real difference, helping to create a more inclusive future for students and teachers. "I don't even know what to say," she finally replied, her voice cracking with emotion. Principal Matthews smiled warmly, something Ava rarely saw from him. "Say yes, Ava. You've shown us what true leadership is. Now, help us expand what you've started." She looked around the classroom, taking in the colorful posters and projects of her students adorning the walls. She thought of all the children she'd taught over the years, the lives she'd touched. She thought of Emily and that terrifying moment in the pool that had started this journey. Taking a deep breath, she turned to the group and said, her voice firming, "Yes, I honor this challenge." The room was filled with smiles and congratulations as they discussed next steps and future plans. Ava felt a sense of purpose growing within her. She had always known that education was her passion, but now she had a broader vision of what that could mean. Later that evening, sitting on her porch, she watched the sunset and reflected on the extraordinary journey she had been on over the past year. She had risen from the depths of despair to find new purpose and a new role in her community. She thought of all the people who had contributed to this transformation, her students, her colleagues, and even those who had initially opposed her. Each interaction, each challenge, had strengthened her and deepened her understanding. As the first stars appeared in the sky, Ava made a silent promise to herself and her community: she would continue to fight for understanding, to bridge divides and create spaces where everyone felt valued and heard. She knew it would not be an easy journey, but she was ready for the challenge. Suddenly, she saw movement ahead of her. A group of neighbors were out for an evening walk. Among them were faces that had previously looked at her with suspicion, but now offered warm smiles and friendly waves. Ava returned the gesture, feeling a deep sense of belonging. This was her home, her community, and together, they were writing a new chapter of growth, understanding, and hope for a more inclusive future. As she prepared to enter, Ava paused, taking in the peaceful scene before her. She thought about the little girl she had saved and the changes that one act of courage had triggered. With a smile on her face, she knew that the greatest transformations begin with small gestures, and her journey was just beginning. As she closed the door, she felt excited about the future, about all the lives she would touch and the changes she would help make. At that moment, Ava knew that her true heroism lay not just in saving a life, but in her ongoing commitment to education, understanding, and building a community where everyone could thrive. It was a mission she would embrace with passion, one day at a time. If you were touched by this story of bravery, resilience, and standing up for what's right, be sure to subscribe to my channel. I put my heart into every story I create, and your support is essential to continuing this journey. Thank you so much for being here with me.